Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and it's that time where we kind of, we turn all our cameras up to Salem to find out what's going on up there as the Oregon legislature is still in session. And we're delighted to have back with us our good friend. In fact, he's a resident of Southern Oregon, Dave Dotterrer. He's the Oregon House and Senate Republican Budget Coordinator, and he kind of has his finger on the pulse. Dave, nice to see you, friend. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Hey, not bad, not bad. Well, here we are, almost June, and where are we in the process?
You know, things are moving still, I guess is the best way to describe it. Some of the budget bills are starting to move now, the ones that are not particularly, controversial or anything like that. But the whole issue of PERS and tax increases and those things are still on the table, and the discussions are still going on. And they've moved. We talked 2 weeks ago, and they've moved since then in terms of the details, but the basics are still the same.
Okay, so anything happening with PERS that sets an alarm with you?
No, actually, I think that we're starting to see some recognition on the liberals Democrats side that, you know what, yeah, we're going to have to do this because the Republicans aren't moving on this one. On the other side of the equation, they're holding fast and saying this has got to be done. It's the right thing to do. So therefore, this is. I think we're going to see some more PERS come out of this. Even though you can almost see the claw marks on the ground as they're drug kicking and screaming into this. But okay, that's the way politics works sometimes. So we'll see how this plays out.
Is there any softening on the Republican side on anything that would lean towards a tax increase?
No, actually, there's not. Now, there's been discussion all along that the Republicans are willing to talk about tax increases and negotiate on that, and there's some people who are not happy with that. But you know what? That's again what you got to do. You come to the table, you want to do something in a bipartisan way, and everybody's got to give a little bit, and so that's where we are with that. So no, but in terms of softening about, we'll go ahead and give you some tax increases, but we're not going to. We're falling off of PERS. No, that's not happening.
All right. Well, the other thing that seems to be obvious, we still got a job problem in this state. Is there any legislation that would improve the job situation or at least attract some new companies to come into the state and set up shop?
No, we're still, it's kind of amazing. Senator Knopp and Senator Olson have put together a group that's a jobs coalition. And I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but I asked Senator Olson, I said, this is kind of late in the process. Why are we doing this so late in session? Because really, this is almost too late. And he said, well, it never dawned on him that given this was so important that you had to put some kind of a coalition together to make something like this happen. It ought to be something that the legislature just naturally does. We know where the problems are, and we know we need to do something about this. I mean, we know, for example, that the Rogue Valley has got a much higher unemployment rate. We know that there's problems in rural Oregon, and there's this urban-rural divide with that, and the state legislature needs to do something about that, and they can. Now, they can't create the jobs, but a government sets the stage for prosperity, doesn't create prosperity. And we have a government that gets in the way of prosperity in many cases.
All right. Is K through 12 still a factor? I mean, have they figured out what that number may be? I mean, these poor school districts are trying to figure out what they're going to do next year.
Well, that's interesting. You asked that question because that's exactly what we've been saying is, wait a minute, you could have passed this piece of the budget a long time ago. I mean, there was not a lot of controversy over that particular number. And last session, when you had a bipartisan coalition working together on this, we passed the bill, I'm trying to remember exactly now, but more than a month before this. So there really is in my mind, there's no excuse for not having passed that K-12 budget, since we really know what the number is.
Do you know what it is?
Oh, well, right now the number is about $6.5 billion. It's about a 14% increase.
Wow.
12. I mean, it's a big increase, and that's in hard dollars. And then you start to throw in PERS savings on top of that, depending on which PERS program you work with, and you get yourself rapidly up to almost, 6 3/4, and maybe even more pushing $7 billion, you know, and then like a 20% increase with buying power, because this is important that people recognize that we're talking not just hard dollars here, but when you start doing PERS reform, what do you buy with those dollars? Well, all of a sudden you're not spending as much money on PERS, so you're doing other things.
Yeah. Well, Dave, we watched, as a result of this past week, some of these elections, of course, school boards and all that, but counties had some special measures on there to help fund some of their safety programs, and a lot of them turned it down, and now there's rumors that the state may step in. Have you heard that?
Well, you know, there's a joint bipartisan committee, and I think this is the right way to do things. There's a special joint committee that's evenly split between Republicans and Democrats that are looking at that issue. And where that's going to go now, I don't know. I haven't really been that heavily engaged with that piece of it. I just know that I've watched part of it, and you're right, there are discussions about, okay, let's wait and see what happens with these elections. And now, what's the role of the state? Because that's clearly a responsibility. And I just listened to your newscast where the governor said, you know, we the state have a responsibility on the security and policing and things like that. And that's absolutely right. I mean, that's the most important function of government. We're going to have to carry that out, right?
You know, because it sets up some of almost a legal quagmire, because the state, each county now is violating their charter by not providing it because they can't afford it. That forces the state to come in, which means they haven't budgeted for it. So, who's going to pay for this?
That's exactly right. And you know, and you also get into the whole concept of local governance. I mean, that's the way we set up the Oregon Constitution with the counties. And it's a mini version of federalism, but this is what you're seeing. You're seeing the federal government taking over more and more power for things, and now you may be seeing the state. So I'm worried about this not just from a fiscal standpoint. I'm talking about this from a governance standpoint, because now you're giving more and more power to the state government. And is that really what we would want to have in terms of how we police our neighborhoods and those kinds of things?
All right. So when do you think this thing's going to have a rush to the end? I mean, you're 1st of June now, almost. You're a week away from it. But and you guys like to get out of there mid-June. Is that a possibility?
I wouldn't think we'd get out of here by mid-June. I think there's a possibility you get out of here by the end of June, or, 4th of July, something like that. Constitutionally, you've got until the second week of July. But and the plan all along was the end of June. I suppose that's possible. But again, period. We're still at the table talking about PERS and where we're going to go, and we may be a little bit closer, and people will keep putting more cards on the table. But we'll just got to see when we got to kind of wait for that log jam to break.
You see any snakes in the grass? Anything that we haven't popped up yet?
Well, I got to tell you something. There is one. There's a snake in the grass that really, really concerns me. There's this constitutional prescription that people passed, which was a clear will of the people, which said, if you're going to raise taxes, you, the legislature, have to. It's a supermajority. It's a 3/5 majority that's required. And what we're hearing is there's a plan being put on the table by the Democrats that said this: what we will do is we will, in the same bill, we will reduce taxes by a certain amount. In other words, we'll extend some tax credits and some things like that. And in the same bill, we will raise the same amount of taxes, or a penny less, and therefore the net is it's not a tax increase and it's not a supermajority. Now, everybody kind of let that settle in for a second and think about that. I'm sure that good lawyers can argue either side of it, but the simple fact of the matter is it's a tax increase on somebody, and that's clearly not what the will of the people. That was not the intent. The intent of the people was, look, if you're going to raise taxes, you got to have a supermajority. The words that come to my mind about this little scheme is, I think it's sleazy and it's unethical. I just don't think you should. That's not one of the things that I want my government doing, because they're clearly just doing a workaround. And that's on the table, and that one really bothers me a lot, just from a ethical standpoint.
Has the governor weighed in on that?
I have not heard. No, as far as I know.
Who's leading that charge?
But again, I don't know where those discussions are, because Perry, again, as I've mentioned to you, they don't let me into the Democratic caucus discussions here, and so I don't know what they're saying, and that's who's putting this little scheme together. I just think it's a scheme and it's sleazy. So
Yeah.
And you said, so what's going on? Well, that's one of those things that's happening in the background, and I just think that the people ought to be aware that this is going on.
Well, Dave, you're a nice guy. I don't know why they don't let you in over there.
I would go in there and say, gee, just a fly on the wall here, man. Don't pay attention to me.
Well, you're doing great work. Thank you for your service up there and keeping an eye on it. We'll check back in with you, but keep an eye on that one. I mean, at the end of the day, you're absolutely correct. The tax increase is the tax increase. It's as simple as that.
That's exactly right.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you. Hang in there, pal.
Okay. Take care.
All right.
God bless.
All right. You too. God bless. All right. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at the Dove TV. Did you know that when you support the Dove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Well, in Southern Oregon, who would ever think that human trafficking takes place? Well, it's a problem bigger than you possibly could imagine. And our special guest is Rebecca Bender, and our own Paulina talked to her about that. And let's join them now in their conversation.
Well, we have a very special guest today, Rebecca Bender. She is the survivor of human trafficking and also an author of a new book called Roadmap to Redemption. So we will talk about the book, but first let me welcome Rebecca to the studio. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us your story. Let's start with that.
Well, I was born and raised here in Southern Oregon. I moved to Eugene as a young 18-year-old girl, and it was near the U of O campus that I met my trafficker. And for about 6 months, he pretended to be my boyfriend and dated me, got to know my hopes and fears and dreams. When he invited me to move in with him, I was really flattered, and I thought finally I had met the man of my dreams. Mm-hmm. But as soon as he moved me away from my family and friends and secluded me, the trafficking began immediately.
What do you mean by trafficking?
He slapped me across the face and took me to an escort service and forced me to sell myself.
And that was in Oregon?
In Las Vegas was where he ended up moving me to.
Okay, so you went to Has he ever met your family?
Yeah, he met my family in the beginning. Mm-hmm. They really liked him. They thought, oh, what a great boyfriend.
And so you went to Las Vegas to just work or to live with him?
To live with him. He said that he was a record producer, which seemed believable that he went to Las Vegas so frequently since it was an entertainment capital.
Yeah.
And he was very well off, so I guess I just assumed that I was just going to be able to live with him and help with his business. And
so there was no sign, at least for an 18-year-old, you didn't see anything suspicious in his behavior before you got there?
Looking back, obviously, now that I'm older and I've done a lot of work on the issue of fighting human trafficking, I've created a red flag brochure list. And so it's kind of called, Are You Dating a Pimp? And it gives girls some telltale signs on how to identify if they're in a relationship with someone that might not really be their boyfriend.
So when you got to Las Vegas, he took you to a house, I suppose, right? Full of girls. So what does it look like?
No.
What happens?
Yeah, everyone asks that. And, you know, kind of like we talked about earlier, human trafficking in America is much different than it looks like in a third world country. You don't have girls handcuffed to beds, stuffed in cargo ships. We are a developed, civilized country. And so we need to really equip our culture on what human trafficking looks like in a developed country like America. If we're all looking for what human trafficking looks like in Thailand, we're never going to find it because we're not in Thailand. We're in America. And so when he trafficked me, to the outside appearance, it probably looked like I was with in a domestic violence situation and I had chose a life of prostitution. That's probably from the outside how it looked. But there are some really key distinctive factors that if we are able to get people trained on how to identify human trafficking, then there might have been some intervention steps there that maybe a police, law enforcement, or lawyer, detective could have saw and made a difference.
Did you love him?
I did. I mean, I thought he was my boyfriend, so of course I loved him. I wouldn't have moved in with him if I didn't.
Was that the reason you stayed? Because how many years were you in trafficking? How many years were you in Vegas?
In and out of trafficking for nearly 6 years. And in that time, I had been through 3 different traffickers, traded, sold up. I had been branded twice, and I've been to jail 7 times.
And so you've been through several traffickers. So at some point, maybe right away, you realize, okay, you're not here for your boyfriend, you're here to do what they want you to do.
Correct.
Was there any way to escape it at any point at all?
Well, everyone asks that. Why didn't you just run? That's the biggest question. And I always answer that with a couple things. One is, I did run. I wouldn't be sitting here, right? There are many girls that are still stuck in human trafficking. So the fact that I am here says that I did eventually run. But I did try to escape several times. And there's so many layers of manipulation and coercion and brainwashing tactics that are actually proven in human trafficking situations. Sometimes you don't feel like there's a choice. Sometimes your family's being held against you. I had a daughter, and they would say, if you don't come home tonight, then you'll find your daughter out on the corner. So that was a real factor to come home. They would say, well, you can leave, it's your choice, but you leave with what you come with. And I bought those clothes, and I bought that car. So take your clothes off, give me your car keys and your cell phone, then you can leave. There's the door. It doesn't really seem like a choice when it's put to you in that perspective. And there were times I tried to come home, but my trafficker followed me here to Medford and found me at Boatneck.
And just took you back?
I just, to see him there was so shocking and startling, and I knew the violence that he was capable of. I mean, I've been hospitalized for dehydration, exhaustion, beaten till I was unrecognizable. So my initial shock was, don't do anything, I'll just come with you, please don't cause a scene. And so I flew back to Vegas with him that day.
So what happened? How did you escape that vicious circle?
Well, finally in 2007, the FBI raided the home that I was in for organized prostitution. And initially they came in with a very criminal-minded approach and put all of us, there was 4 girls in the home, and they put us all in handcuffs and zip ties in the corner and right in front of our children. And that was very humiliating. They definitely didn't take a victim approach, which is part of the training that I really try to do with a lot of our law enforcement and district attorneys, is a victim-centered approach. That will just hopefully build that bridge that makes girls want to talk about what their trafficker did to them, as opposed to becoming very defensive and afraid. It was after the FBI raid that it took us several months for me to finally get out, but when my trafficker was arrested for tax evasion, not human trafficking, because none of us would talk, it allowed me a separation from him that began my transition home. So
before I ask you about transition, he is still out there. Your trafficker has never been jailed.
Correct. He spent a year in prison for tax evasion, but like I said, none of us would talk. We're all too afraid, especially also being treated like a criminal. I was afraid. They didn't come in like we were human trafficking victims. They came in like we were prostitutes, and so I was afraid that I'd lose my daughter if I talked too much. I was worried about what to say or not to say, so we just didn't talk at all. And I don't think I'll ever talk about who he was or his name. It's not worth it to me anymore. I've moved on. So has he. I'm sure there are other victims out there, and I'm really sorry for them, but I'm doing what I can to save the victims that I'm in contact with now.
Where is God in this picture?
God changed everything for me. He really took me like the prodigal son and welcomed me home and set me as a rightful heir. And if it wasn't for Jesus, I wouldn't be here. He set my feet on a rock. He put a new song in my heart and in my mouth. I mean, I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for him. And that's really what the book is about. If we don't give victims Jesus Christ, we're really just switching their cloak of bondage. We're giving them self-importance or fame or money or purpose as their new form of bondage. And while the handcuffs might be pink and fuzzy, they're still in handcuffs.
And the book you're talking about is Roadmap to Redemption. It's newly released. It just came out February, right? And I'm sure it's available everywhere. You can just type it in the name, Rebecca Bender, Roadmap to Redemption. With Christ and the victims, how did your family was Christian, right? So you grew up in a Christian home. At what point in your 6-year struggle in Las Vegas did you actually hear God's voice, or however it happened with you? What made you actually realize that God is there for you?
Well, there's many instances that God set up, and just to recap, while my grandparents were Christian, but my parents never brought me to church. Wasn't really raised in a strong Christian home. I mean, I went to Sunday school with my grandma occasionally, and I remember stories of Noah's Ark, but I never was taught the stories of Rahab or Paul in house arrest, or, I was never taught any of those things. So I felt like God was so foreign that he couldn't identify with me and what I was going through. And so as he started putting roadblocks in my path, I started to think, wow, I wonder what this God thing is about. I had a working girl one night pull me aside in a hotel and say, hey, can I talk to you? And I thought, she's going to try to rob me, or her trafficker's going to be outside in the parking lot to try to rob me. And I said, what? And I remember her saying, I don't know if you know God, but the path that you're on is about to kill you. And I immediately put my hands on my face. I couldn't stop crying. And she put her hand on my shoulder and said, do not be afraid. God loves you, but he wants you to know that you need to change your road, to change the path that you're on. And it was when I finally gave my life to the Lord, and I got involved in a women's rehabilitation home, and we had some required reading. I opened up the Old Testament, and it was the story of Moses hiding his face in his hands as the Spirit of the Lord passed by, and the scripture says, and the Lord replied, do not be afraid. And it instantly hit me, wow, the Spirit of the Lord had used another prostitute that day to get my attention. He can use anybody, and he still does. It wasn't just an Old Testament story, he still does it today.
Wow. There's so much to talk about and I would encourage everyone to look at this book, because when I heard you speak at the Christmas dinner, it's changed my whole perspective, my attitude towards human trafficking. I had no idea. And another thing that was shocking to me was how prevalent it is in Oregon.
Oregon is a huge hub for human trafficking. We're one of the top hubs in the country.
So we don't have much time left. What signs can parents look for?
If your daughter's dating a pimp, some of the signs you can look for is if she's coming home with very expensive things, jewelry, watches, purses, shoes, if she's out of town frequently, if her boyfriend doesn't have a job that you can actually visit, like an office like this that you could come see. Another sign they can look for is if he's really getting to know her hopes and dreams and promising her these grandiose ideas. All of those things combined, anytime he wants to move her away, seclude her in a different city. Another thing we say too is any attempt to fast track a relationship is an attempt to control. So many of those things put together should definitely raise some red flags.
Apart from the book that you just published, you also help in different organizations. You travel around, you speak locally. Redemption Ridge is something you're involved in. Can you just give a brief outline what that is? Yeah,
Redemption Ridge, which is redemptionridge.com, is a local safe house for domestic minor sex trafficking victims. I'm their director of mentoring, and we're currently working at getting the licensing to be able to accept children. It's a very difficult process in the state of Oregon, but we've already been given a facility, and we're just working on getting that prepared for the girls.
So wonderful to see you smile.
Thank you.
I know the story, and I have more details than you were able to share today. And just to know that you have a family, a beautiful family, 3 beautiful kids, a husband that loves you. And it's amazing to see what Christ has done in your life, and I really hope that your story can help someone else. As a closing thing, what can you tell people who either dealing with this or maybe clueless about it, some kind of a message that maybe will do something in someone's heart?
Well, something that I love to tell people is that we really need to start looking at identifying what human trafficking looks like in America. It's not what the media portrays in movies. It's really crucial to know that 90% of prostitutes in America are actually under the control of a trafficker, which should create an automatic assumption in our mind that when we see a prostitute, we don't say that child prostitute, that we know this child is a victim and there's an adult behind this situation. We need to trust in the Lord that he wants to help those people, and those are his daughters. And I know that if God can do it for me, he can do it for anybody, that he's the same today, yesterday, and tomorrow, that there is hope for these girls. They can become amazing mothers and wives and members of our society, that we shouldn't give up hope on them, because God hasn't given up hope on them either.
Do you think human trafficking can end eventually?
That's hard to say. I know that we abolished slavery 150 years ago, and I would love to see modern day slavery abolished today. I also know that, thinking that, selling drugs will ever change, children become a product that traffickers are selling, and I'm not sure if that will ever change. I know it can become less and less, and we can hopefully make a drastic improvement in what's going on in our country.
Well, God willing. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Today we had Rebecca Bender with us. She's an author of a new book, Roadmap to Redemption, a survivor of human trafficking, and just a wonderful, beautiful person.
Oh, thank you.
Wow, fascinating story. Coming up next, well, the man that can help us maybe get to the bottom of what the mess is all about with the IRS. We are really honored to have back with us Jordan Sekulow, coming up next here on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at the Dove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at the Dove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Welcome back, and we are delighted to have with us today Jordan Sekulow. He's the Executive Director of the American Center for Law and Justice. He hosts his own show, and he co-hosts with his father, Jay Sekulow Live. And Jordan, nice to have you with us, my friend. Okay, hey, listen, the IRS scandal, unbelievable. I mean, just unbelievable. And I think the one thing that I want to try to get straightened out, Jordan, did Miss Lerner forfeit her Fifth Amendment right yesterday by making an opening statement?
You know, it's certainly arguable. I mean, the first reaction for all of us who are attorneys was, whoa. I mean, certainly in court, that would have been a forfeiture. Asserting guilt or innocence, so she asserted her innocence. She didn't just say, hey, my name's Lois Lerner, I have this job, this is what I do. She went on to say, I didn't do anything wrong, I have not miscommunicated, I have not broken the law. Those are three areas of assertions, and when you make assertions, people get to ask questions back. When you take the fifth, you don't get to say I'm not guilty. Now there is some question. It's a congressional hearing. It's not a criminal court, and she's not technically a defendant. But the courts are kind of all over. Here's what I think could happen. Chairman Issa could call her back. He's the congressman in charge of the Government Oversight Reform Committee. He'd call her back. He'd say, you've got to come. She may or may not be there. She probably gets subpoenaed again. Then she would not testify. And then the question, she would try to invoke the fifth again. The question would be, is the committee willing to go to court over this issue? Is she willing to go to court over the issue? I mean, so it's a very complicated issue, but she certainly, it just seems, based on everything you learn in law school about how these rules work and about the Supreme Court precedent, it's a right that everyone has, but it's not something where you can just say it whenever you want to after making assertions like that. There are times when you can do Fifth Amendment and claim that right sometimes and answer other questions, and Chairman Issa did ask her about that, but she said no, she wanted the blanket fifth, but she did that, but she made assertions before she invoked that. So the question is, you were supposed to be able to ask questions about assertions she makes.
Well, you know what's interesting? If she didn't do anything, then why didn't she talk?
Well, exactly right. And who gets up and is going to claim the fifth and open? She's a lawyer and she's got counsel, and who claims the fifth? But before doing so, says I'm not guilty. That's the real key line. Is first of all, the Fifth Amendment it is important, and she mentioned this in her statement, but I think she's trying to go too far. It does protect innocent people from getting themselves into trouble or testifying against yourself. In the criminal court context, if you go to civil court and you claim the fifth because something you say may be incriminating, there are times when the jury or the judge can take that as an inference of truth for the other side, as if you're not talking because what they think you did is true. So where in criminal court, yes, you're constitutionally protected to, you don't have to send yourself to jail. The prosecutors have to prove so.
But
that doesn't mean that the public has to take you at your fifth. That's not what that rule's about.
All right. So if this elevates to a special prosecutor or even into a select committee and she's subpoenaed, what happens?
If it goes to a special prosecutor, select committee, those kind of settings, she could possibly try to make deals. There have been in the past immunity deals granted by the government to people like Lois Lerner so that they can testify, but it can get very complicated. And I think what we do know now from that just yesterday is that we found the person who knows enough to where they don't want to talk. And, this is someone who has given testimony. I don't know if people picked up on, but the IG is now coming under some heat, the Inspector General, because this report was supposed to be out 6 weeks before the election, and it wasn't. And they released the emails yesterday showing all the delay, saying, oh, sorry, it's not going to be done yet. The IG also did not deliver Lois Lerner's testimony to the Inspector General until the night before, which was okay, except for he didn't send it to the Republicans, the majority party on the committee. There are real problems here that are going to cause long-term headaches for this White House. The timeline has changed multiple times. The Deputy Chief of Staff worked with Lois Lerner now on releasing this information. Deputy Chief of Staff for the White House. No one buys that the IRS commissioner mentioned this to no one after making 118 trips over to the White House in 2 years. And he said it kind of in a very specific way. This is very legal, the way that everyone talks in these things. They said, did you ever say this to the White House? Did I ever say that we were targeting conservatives? No. Well, that's not what the question was. The question was, did you ever tell anybody at the White House there was a problem with the IRS, inappropriately targeting political groups? And he didn't answer that question. So, again, this is just the beginning. I think Congressman Trey Gowdy made a good point. Congress can't try a criminal court. So when you've got people that really are scared about going to jail, and they should be when it's involving these kind of charges, and this kind of cover-up, and a lot of this, the big crime is always the cover-up. Yeah. You can do your job poorly. You can do things that are unconstitutional that aren't necessarily going to send you to jail, but when you lie to Congress, it is. But it takes a criminal court to take that next step.
Jordan, do you think we'll ever get to the bottom of this? I mean, this could stifle the administration, maybe even get to the point of impeachment. I don't know, but this, you cannot convince me that the president didn't know about this.
No, and the president hasn't been clear. I don't think anyone's being a conspiracy theorist by at least speculating. And the reason why is this. When it involves the IRS, Article 2 of the impeachment against Nixon and President Nixon was improper use of the IRS. And so this is a very specific charge. And when the president was asked by the reporter last week, which he didn't have to answer the question this way, but he obviously had written a response with his legal advisors. He's a lawyer as well. He didn't say, I didn't know about this. He said, I didn't know about the report. Now, that's a very specific answer, so he is keeping himself clear of lying, basically. He's saying he didn't know about the report till sometime in April, instead of saying I didn't know about this, that this with targeting was happening at all. So, again, we're filing lawsuits next week, federal court. There have been a couple already filed, but the key here is the IRS and the federal government don't like discovery in the legal process. That's when you start getting documents that are related at all to what you are charging. So the first key for us, of course, is getting past the government. We'll try to file motions to dismiss and summary judgments. They're going to say there's not an issue. There's no harm. But, of course, we pointed out, Jay Carney said this week, the White House press secretary, that the president, that this procedure, that all this targeting stopped and the letters stopped May of 2012. We have 26 letters going to 18 different clients since May 2012. And we have 10 groups that we represent that have still not been approved, some that filed for approval literally January of 2010.
All right, you take the IRS, you take and Benghazi, and of course you got the AP's phone tapping, and I understand now that phone tap, or the Justice Department, excuse me, going to the Fox reporter, even going into the personal phone calls, even to their parents. I mean, hey, wait a minute here. We got a Gestapo government.
First time the federal government would be bringing criminal charges, or even treating a reporter who got classified or leaked information from the person who did something wrong, and reported it. I mean, the reporter is not the one that had the access to classified information, or is it their job to determine whether something is classified or not? That's the leak. The person who makes the leak. We have these press protections. I mean, that's why it's in our First Amendment. But here we have a situation where usually, if the White House is trying to find a leak, and this White House has started more leak investigations than any other in history. They've come down harder on the press. AP, Fox News, CBS is now. Cheryl Atkinson, who did a lot of the Benghazi reporting, Fast and Furious reporting, as well as the Solyndra reporting, and those emails that get out. The truth is, and what have they found? Well, there's been no criminal charges against anyone. And we also know, in this situation involving James Rosen, it would be one thing if they got phone records to find the leak, so that's not so unusual. But to go after his parents and to treat him as a co-conspirator, it's never been done before.
All right. It's so much. I'm afraid that I'm just afraid that it's just going to kind of get lost and washed away. And yet, why isn't Speaker Boehner just dropping the hammer and calling for select committees and special prosecutors? He seems to be pretty passive on all of this stuff. Well,
the Office of the Independent Counsel was eliminated in 1999. So that is not something that's just available to Congress. The president, a special counsel would still be within the Department of Justice as it stands now. Would not be completely independent. And the truth is that the Department of Justice now would have to, would be playing a role any way we look at it, unless Congress were to pass a law and the president was to sign to appoint an independent counsel. And I think that's where the problem Speaker Boehner is going, is run into, as well as the fact that now you've got people taking the Fifth. When people start taking the Fifth, you have to rely on law enforcement to take this to the next step. I mean, Lois Lerner may never speak. People have to realize that. She could be put on trial for criminal charges and may never talk. And the government may or may not have enough evidence, we don't know yet, to convict her of a crime. But she certainly thinks that they could. I mean, you don't take the Fifth Amendment. No one takes the Fifth publicly like that if they aren't really scared that they may be charged and may be guilty. I mean, it's too damaging to do in that setting. It's one thing in a courtroom. I think people would see it differently. That's where they expect it. But before a congressional committee, and that's because of it's really the obstruction of justice, lying to Congress.
Unbelievable. Jordan, thank you. People want to support what you and your dad do. What do they do?
ACLJ.org. And if there's anybody out there with the organizations that they feel were targeted, we've got a lot of new people. We're talking to 5, 6 new clients, potential clients right now, who also feel that they were targeting during this IRS process. So ACLJ.org, you can contact us there and all the latest info as well. Thank you, Perry.
Well, I value our time together, friend. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at the Dove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on the Dove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
All right, we're back. And delighted to have in the studio with us today Daron Williams. He's the founder and the director of Joe's Place Ministries in Grants Pass. And Daron, nice to see you, man.
Thank you, Perry. Thanks for having us here.
Yeah, very, very unique ministry. And, well, I'll let you tell us. What do you do?
Well, we're an outreach to homeless and street kids, and another term we use is unparented teens there in Josephine County. And the reason we started was there is probably over 300 homeless teens in the Grants Pass area. Wow. And so God just said, hey, we're praying about how to reach these kids, and he said, why don't you do it? So we started, and we serve meals, clothes, hygiene products, and we have a mobile unit that we go out with 3 nights a week in Grants Pass. And the primary reason and goal of what we do is to build relationships with these young people, to get them to trust us so that we can share the gospel and help them with things in their life.
You know, when you hear these numbers, Daron, you just kind of shake your head and say, no, that can't be. You know, I remember when Hearts with a Mission started, and they were dealing with the huge numbers of homeless teenagers, or what they call couch hoppers, and some kids literally living under the bridge, and you're saying, what, unparented teens?
Yeah, unparented. They may have a mom or dad, but they don't want to be home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they're basically raising themselves. You know, mom may be a meth addict or have the third or fourth boyfriend in the house, or, I mean, just every kid's got a different story, and they're on the street. I mean, they are literally out all day long. And then there's the ones that they're literally camping up on the railroad tracks and just, you know, living day to day trying to survive.
And you zero down 11 to 18. Yeah. I don't know how you selected those numbers.
Well,
but
it's you know, really we've been playing with that number. When we're out with a mobile unit like we are, we don't turn anybody away. If they're hungry, they want a meal, they can come by. But really, we're kind of stretching that now to about the mid-20s, because we're finding some of those 23, 24-year-olds, they're really about the same as the 15, 16. They just have a different age, and they're really not doing anything different. They're just surviving on the streets.
How do you find them?
Actually, we started with a small facility up on the north end of town, and kids aren't up in that area. They're really in the downtown Grants Pass area. So we closed that, and one night I was just sitting at the park praying, Lord, you know, where you want us to reach these kids? And I look up, and there's like 30, 40 kids just mingling around at the Riverside Park, and so we just went to them, and we're now a kind of a fixed entity there in town. They know where we're at, and we have 3 consistent locations where they can come and find us. So
that's incredible. Now, building relationships takes time.
It does. It does.
A lot of time.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that, you know, if let's say a young person, 16, 17 years old, and he's had just his whole life has been, you know, survival in one sense or the other. That's all they know. So you're not going to come in and change them in a 2 or 3 week period. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have this young guy, been hanging out with him for 3 years, and I've shared the gospel built into his life, and there's some trust built there. And, you know, matter of fact, he called me yesterday and said, "Hey, man, I found out I'm off parole. I've been 18 months, man. I haven't gotten in trouble." And he called me to celebrate that. And it was, I mean, those are those moments that you say, "Thank you, Lord," because that's another step, you know, closer to, you know, building into this kid's life.
Have you seen the fruit of your labor? I mean, have you led kids to Christ?
You know, there's been a couple that have made some different, you know, better choices. I've prayed with kids. You know, sometimes you see some change, sometimes you don't. We share the gospel a lot. I mean, and it's through, you know, through life, because every kid's, their story's different.
And they keep coming back on that.
They keep coming back, and there's you know, one kid said the only guy he can trust is, you know, Daron and this other guy in town, you know, this other counselor he had. And it's like, that's interesting, you know, all the different people, you know, we were one of those people that he can trust. So,
have you gotten involved in any like family reconciliations or anything?
Not a whole lot. I mean, we don't get a lot of contact with parents. We get some who'll actually come down, but for the most part, we're dealing with those young people. So,
what are your needs? How can people help you do what you do?
You know, we need prayer. You know, it is a battle on the field, and you know, I know we say that, but you know, we have a team of prayer warriors that we send out requests to periodically, and we ask them this: we need covering. We're out on the street. We're out, you know, really where the enemy is attacking these kids. So we need prayer, and obviously, you know, it's a nonprofit organization. We have our 501c3, so finances are obviously an issue. Volunteers to come down, and you know, if they like to cook, great, they can cook, and if they say, "Hey, I'd love to just love on some kids," coming out, and
you kind of train them a little bit and tell them what the do's and don'ts are.
Yep, you bet. And if they come and they say, "Man, this is not for me," great. If they come and say, "Man, I love this," then we kind of just plug them in. We're doing probably, you know, just a portion of a vision that's a lot larger. We would love to have a facility, like a training facility, where we can begin to do, you know, the world right now, mentoring is huge. But when you look at Scripture, it's discipleship. And we want to create a facility where we can, through discipleship, you know, help them with job training and education, GEDs, and then just basic life skills. You know, some of the times we take for granted some of the things we learned growing up.
Yeah.
You know, your dad said, hey, come on, let's do this together. You watched your mom do certain things, and you did it as a family. Well, when you don't have that family nucleus, these kids don't have skills. I've written job resumes for kids and said, hey, what do you know how to do? And there's just this blank stare.
Wow.
So helping them with some of those, you know, hooking them up maybe with some local businesses or some internships. I mean, so we kind of are blue skying and praying that God would, you know, move us forward, and we believe He is. It's exciting to see how God is beginning to take this vision that He gave us about 5 years ago, and we're seeing it come into play.
Can businesses get involved in what you do?
Yeah, we do have a couple businesses that support us. We have some that provide product, others that provide support. We have some churches that are behind us, and individuals. So yeah, we have multiple people that are businesses, churches, and individuals. So.
Now, are you able to, when you're gathering food, you obviously have to go buy it, but can people bring it to you or something like that? I don't know how all that works.
Yeah, we have some ladies that they bring baked goods.
Oh, really?
And that's what they love to do. They love to bring cookies or brownies or cakes. They bring it to us, and well, that's nice to have a baked good. Kids love that, you know.
Well, food is a great equalizer, isn't it?
It is. It brings. There's some kind of commonality when you throw a plate of food in front of somebody. So.
Yeah. What's next? I mean, obviously you're feeding them, you're talking to them, you're giving them clothing and things like that. But what about the shelter part?
You know, it's a great question, and you know, we've posed that question as a board. You know, what do we want to do? And we really believe that God is directing us not necessarily towards the shelter side, but home side, to have. And right now, we're actually partnering with a church in Grants Pass to find homes of Christian families who are willing to take a young person in and actually give them a home with a mom and dad and some stability. The shelter thing, I think it's great, but there's, you can ask Kevin, the resources and regulations that constrain him and what he does. Yeah. And we're saying, well, what if we came at it and had 20, 30 families who would be willing to take a young person? And it's going to be hard, it's going to be dirty and messy, you know, it's going to be difficult on your home, but to say, I'm going to commit to giving this young person a shot, you know, and becoming a family. And that's kind of how we're praying. And so we're actually looking right now, we have 2 young girls that said they would like to have a place who are actually on the street. And so we're working to get them in a home right now.
All right, so how do people get a hold of you, Daron, to help?
We have a website. It's joesplaceministries.org, and we have a P.O. Box 1226, Grants Pass, Oregon 97528, or you can reach me at 541-476-4563.
All right, so well, it's a fascinating thing. I just the whole homeless teen child thing is, I have a hard time getting my head around it, but it's a reality.
It is.
It's a reality that's out there. Well, thank you, buddy, for what you're doing. Let me encourage people to check it out. joesministryplace.org? joesplaceministries.org. Well, joesplaceministries.org. And if the Lord's kind of tugging on your heart to help them, get involved and check it out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daron.
Thanks,
Blessings on you for what you do.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at the Dove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.